The rain, the biker, and the first act of kindness. Lily had spent the last 5 years working at Maplewood Cafe, a small, cozy diner nestled at the heart of a quiet town. It wasn't glamorous, nor was it a place where people expected excitement, but it had warmth. The regulars came for more than just coffee and breakfast. They came for the familiarity, the feeling of home. And Lily, she was part of that comfort. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a friend, a listener, and at times, the only bright moment in someone's day. She knew Mr. Harris. The old veteran preferred his coffee black, but with 1 sugar when he was in a good mood. She knew Mrs. Carter, a widow, liked her toast extra crispy because her late husband used to make it that way. She remembered birthdays, asked about grandkids, and made sure the coffee was always hot and fresh. It was a stormy evening when everything changed. The rain came down hard, hammering against the windows with relentless force. The streetlights flickered as wind gusts rattled the power lines. Inside the cafe, the hum of casual conversations filled the air, the clinking of cutlery on porcelain adding a rhythmic charm to the atmosphere. Then the door creaked open. A large figure stepped in, silhouetted against the downpour. His presence sent a hush through the room. The biker was soaked, water dripping from his leather jacket, pooling onto the floor. His boots were thick with mud, his beard unkempt, and his tattoos winding down his muscular arms. Lily, wiping down the counter, immediately noticed how the room reacted. Parents pulled their children closer. A couple whispered to each other. A group of businessmen in the corner exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear he wasn't welcome. The biker walked to a corner table, head low, as if used to the weight of judgment. He pulled off his gloves and exhaled, his breath visible in the cold air. Lily hesitated for only a moment before grabbing a towel from behind the counter. As she approached his table, she noticed how he flinched slightly, as if expecting hostility. Instead, she gave him a warm smile and handed him the towel. "Rough weather out there, huh?" she said, her voice light and kind. The biker looked up, his dark eyes flickering with surprise before softening. Kindness. It wasn't what he expected. "Yeah," he muttered, taking the towel and rubbing his hands dry. Didn't plan to stop, but the storm got worse. "You want something to warm up?" "Coffee's fresh," Lily offered. He hesitated. "Just coffee. But I left my wallet in my other jacket." "Didn't realize till now." Lily shrugged. "It's on me." The biker's brows furrowed. "You don't have to do that." "I know." With that, she walked back to the counter and poured a steaming mug of coffee, setting it down in front of him. But just as she turned, a voice cut through the air. "Generous of you," a middle-aged man sneered from across the room. "You sure you want to waste a good cup on someone like that?" Lily stiffened. The businessman, a regular customer named Greg, leaned back in his chair, smirking as he sipped his own coffee. "Looks like the biker gangs are making their rounds," Greg continued. "Hope he doesn't scare off the real customers." A few nervous chuckles rippled across the cafe. The tension thickened, a silent judgment settling over the room. The biker, now gripping his mug, went still. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply looked down, as if used to this treatment. Lily, however, had heard enough. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm yet calm. "He's just here to get warm and have a meal. That's all." Greg raised an eyebrow. "You don't know that. People like him don't just stop by for coffee." Lily met his gaze without hesitation. "He hasn't caused any trouble. He's just sitting there, minding his own business. Isn't that enough?" The cafe fell silent. Greg scoffed but didn't push further. His wife murmured something to him, and with a huff, he turned back to his plate. But the damage was done. The biker slowly stood, his chair scraping against the floor. His eyes flicked to the exit, his entire posture screaming discomfort. He was going to leave. Lily acted before she could think. "You don't have to go," she said quickly, stepping forward. "It's still pouring out there." The biker hesitated, looking at her, really looking at her this time. There was no pity in her eyes, no condescension, just sincerity. "I don't want to cause any more trouble," he said, his voice rough but grateful. "You're not causing trouble," Lily assured him. "People can say what they want. It doesn't make them right." For the first time since he walked in, the biker smiled. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. "Thanks," he murmured, sitting back down. A cafe gradually returned to normal. Conversations resumed, though quieter than before. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the warmth lingered. But then, the door swung open again, and everything changed. A tall, lean man in a dark vest stepped inside, shaking off the rain. His slicked back hair and polished shoes immediately made Lily's stomach drop. "Mr. Carver," the cafe owner. His sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on the biker first, then on Lily. A man standing near the door, Greg, gestured toward her, speaking in hushed tones. Carver's gaze darkened. Lily's pulse quickened. She knew what was coming, and she knew it wouldn't be fair. The cost of kindness. Lily had seen that look before. Mr. Carver, the cafe's owner, was a businessman through and through. He wasn't cruel, but he had one priority: money. If something, or someone, affected his profits, he acted fast, and without hesitation. He strode toward the counter with the confident, clipped steps of a man who expected obedience. The cafe had fallen silent again, all eyes subtly watching as the confrontation inevitably unfolded. "Lily," Carver said smoothly, stopping just in front of her, his arms crossed. "We need to talk. Now." Lily didn't flinch. She met his gaze, trying to steady the nervous energy bubbling in her chest. "Is something wrong, Mr. Carver?" she asked, feigning calm. Carver exhaled, rubbing his temples as if disappointed. "Don't play dumb," he muttered, casting a sharp glance at the biker in the corner. "That man, you gave him food and coffee. For free." Lily folded her arms. "I did." Greg, still seated with his smirking self-righteousness, decided to chime in. "She not only gave it to him for free, but she also defended him when I pointed out the obvious," Greg said, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "This place has always been a nice, respectable cafe, Mr. Carver. Not some free shelter for people like that." Lily clenched her fists. People like that. Carver's expression darkened, his patience thinning. "Lily," he said, "this isn't a charity. You don't decide who gets free food. That's my money you're giving away." Lily's breath hitched. "It was my tip money," she clarified. "I paid for it myself." That threw him off for a brief second. A flicker of hesitation crossed his features, but his pride wouldn't allow him to back down now. "That doesn't matter," he snapped. "You've created a problem. Do you see the customers here? They're uncomfortable." He turned, gesturing toward the half-empty cafe. "People are leaving, Lily, because of your choices." Lily looked around. Yes, some customers had left, but others, the regulars, the kind ones, stayed. They avoided looking at her, likely fearing they'd be next if they spoke up. She swallowed. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Carver sighed, shaking his head. "That doesn't matter, Lily. What matters is that my business just lost paying customers because of your misplaced sympathy." Lily could feel the biker's gaze on her. He hadn't moved since the conversation started, but she knew he was listening to every word. Carver sighed dramatically, shaking his head as if truly burdened by the inconvenience of her existence. "I've put up with you for a long time, Lily," he said. "You're a hard worker, but you get too attached. This cafe runs on efficiency, not feelings." Lily froze. She could feel it, the dismissal before it even happened. Then he said the words. "You're fired." A gasp rippled through the cafe. Lily's heart clenched. "Excuse me," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Carver crossed his arms. "You heard me." Finish your shift, collect your check, and leave. The world tilted slightly. She had worked here for 5 years, given everything to this place, and she was being thrown away for an act of kindness. The biker stood up. The scraping of his chair echoed through the silent cafe. All heads turned toward him as he slowly, deliberately walked toward the counter, standing next to Lily, his dark eyes locked onto Carver. "You're firing her?" he asked, his voice low but powerful. Carver hesitated for the first time. "This is none of your business." The biker's lips curled into a tight, humorless smile. "Oh, I think it just became my business." The cafe was dead silent. Tension crackled in the air like the storm outside. "Lily did something most people wouldn't," the biker continued. "She saw someone in need and didn't look the other way. And for that, you're punishing her." Carver's jaw clenched. "I don't have to explain myself to you." The biker tilted his head slightly, studying Carver. "You're right. You don't. But I do have to explain this to my people." Carver blinked. "Your people?" The biker smirked. Then he pulled out his phone. "Lily," he said, still looking at Carver. "What time is it?" Lily, dazed, looked at the clock. "Just past 7. The biker nodded, then lifted his phone to his ear. "Boys," he said, his voice calm but carrying a dangerous edge. "You busy? Good. I need you here. Now." He ended the call and put his phone away. Carver's expression flickered with uncertainty. "What the hell are you doing?" The biker simply smiled. "Making sure kindness gets rewarded." Then he turned back to Lily, his voice dropping slightly. "You stood up for me," he said. "Now I stand up for you." Lily stared at him, unable to speak. The biker walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back at Carver. "I'd start counting your regrets," he muttered, "because in a few minutes, you're gonna have a lot of them." And with that, he stepped outside into the storm. Lily exhaled, her heart pounding. Carver scoffed. "What does he think he's gonna scare me? This is ridiculous." Greg chuckled from his seat. "You've got nothing to worry about, Carver. It's just one guy." Then, a low, distant rumble filled the air. Carver stiffened. "What the hell is that?" Lily turned toward the window. Her breath hitched. Motorcycles. Dozens. No, hundreds. The sound of engines roaring like thunder grew closer, rattling the very windows of the cafe. Customers stood up, whispering in shock. The pavement outside shook under the weight of the approaching riders. One by one, rows of bikes lined the street. Their headlights pierced through the rain like fire in the darkness. And then, they stopped. Carver paled. Greg's smirk vanished. The lead biker, the same one Lily had defended, dismounted first. His boots hit the wet pavement with deliberate force. He removed his helmet, shaking out his damp hair before turning to the army of riders behind him. Then, in one fluid movement, every single biker removed their helmets at the same time. Men, women, young, old, all of them standing together. For her, Lily felt her throat tighten. Carver, for the first time, looked afraid. The lead biker smirked. Then he stepped forward, his gaze locked onto Carver's. "Let's talk about firing, Lily." A reckoning at the cafe. The roar of engines had settled into a deep, steady hum, like distant thunder rumbling across the sky. The street outside Maplewood Cafe was now completely filled with motorcycles, parked in perfect formation. Over 100 bikers stood in the rain, their silhouettes sharp against the neon glow of the streetlights. Inside the cafe, tension crackled like static in the air. Lily had never seen Carver speechless before. The cafe owner, who always carried himself with an air of supreme control, now looked visibly shaken. His hands twitched at his sides, and for once, the sharp glint of arrogance in his eyes had dulled. Even Greg, the man who had instigated everything, was sinking into his seat, his once smug grin long gone. Lily turned toward the front of the cafe as the biker leader stepped inside. His boots made slow, deliberate thuds against the wooden floor. He moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need loud words or threats. He simply was. The cafe was silent. Even the remaining customers who had stayed, most of them regulars, held their breaths as they watched something far greater than a simple dispute unfold. The biker leader, Marcus, stopped in front of Carver, his dark eyes locking onto the cafe owners with an unsettling calm. "You fired Lily," Marcus said, his voice low but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Carver swallowed hard, though he tried to keep his composure. "That's none of your concern." Marcus smirked, a slow, knowing expression that sent a ripple of unease through the room. "Oh," he said, "it's very much my concern." He turned slightly, glancing back at the dozens of bikers still standing outside, their eyes focused on the cafe. "See, we take care of our own," Marcus continued. "And when someone shows kindness, especially when no one else does, we don't forget." He looked back at Carver. "So, I'll ask again. You fired Lily." Carver's nostrils flared. "This is a business," he said, his voice tight. "She cost me customers by giving away food for free. And I won't let some." He hesitated, realizing he was about to say something incredibly stupid. He adjusted his stance, trying to regain his usual confidence. "I won't let some random biker tell me how to run my cafe." Marcus's expression didn't change. If anything, his smirk widened. "You really think this is about one free meal?" Marcus asked. "You think this is just about money?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you?" Carver frowned. "Get what?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping just enough that only Carver and Lily could hear. "The world doesn't run on money, Carver. It runs on respect. And you just threw yours in the garbage." Carver tensed. Marcus turned back toward the entrance and lifted a hand. The cafe door swung open. 2 bikers stepped inside. One of them, a burly man with tattoos covering his arms, held a thick envelope in one hand. The other, a woman with dark braids and a sharp gaze, held something much smaller. Keys. Marcus took them both, then turned back to Lily. "This is for you." Lily blinked, stunned. She hesitated before taking the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't dare open it yet. What is this?" she asked. Marcus's expression softened just slightly. "Your new cafe," he said. Lily's breath hitched. She stared at him, unable to comprehend the words. Marcus gestured toward the envelope. "We put our money together. Found a place not too far from here. It's fully stocked, ready to go. You don't have to work for someone like him anymore." Lily couldn't breathe. She had spent the last 5 years pouring her heart and soul into this cafe, believing it was her second home, only to be thrown away like nothing. And now, she was being given something far greater than a job. A fresh start. Her own business. Tears stung her eyes as she clutched the envelope to her chest. I can't accept this," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Yeah, you can. And you will." Carver finally snapped. "You can't do this," he barked, stepping forward. "You think you can just steal my employee and open another cafe right under my nose?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Steal?" He let out a short, amused laugh. "You already threw her away, Carver. And I don't see anyone lining up to work for you now." Carver's face turned red. He glanced around, as if expecting anyone, to back him up. But the staff behind the counter, silent. The remaining customers, watching in awe. And Greg, sinking lower in his chair, avoiding eye contact. Then Marcus delivered the final blow. "You're gonna regret this," he said, voice casual, "because you didn't just lose an employee. You lost your reputation. And once that's gone, your business isn't far behind." He turned back to Lily. "Come on," he said. "Your new place is waiting." Lily hesitated. Then she looked at Carver. She saw the truth, He was already defeated, not just by Marcus, but by his own selfishness. So she nodded. She walked toward the door, and she never looked back. 3 weeks later, the sign above the door read, Lily's Cafe. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pastries filled the air. Laughter and conversation hummed in the background. The cafe was alive, and not just with customers, but with family. Marcus and his bikers had kept their promise. They didn't just hand Lily the cafe. They helped renovate it, promoted it, and made sure it became a thriving business. And now, Carver's old cafe, empty. His once loyal customers had all left, choosing warmth and kindness over cold business tactics. And Carver himself. He had come by once, stood outside, staring at the cafe he had lost. But Lily had felt no bitterness. She had simply smiled, knowing she had something he never would. A place built on kindness. And that was worth more than anything. The cafe that became a home. Lily never thought she'd own a cafe. She had always loved the warmth of the morning rush, the quiet hum of conversations, the way the scent of fresh coffee could turn a bad day into something bearable. But she had never imagined she'd be the one running the show. And yet here she was, standing in her own cafe. Lily's Cafe. It had been 3 weeks since Marcus and his crew gave her the biggest gift of her life. A cafe of her own, free from Carver's rules and judgments. 3 weeks since she walked away from a place that never really valued her. And now, here she was. The cafe had come alive in a way she never imagined. The place itself was smaller than Maplewood Cafe, but it had heart. The walls were lined with hand-painted murals. The furniture was a mix of rustic and modern, and the smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans filled the air. And the customers. They weren't just strangers looking for a quick bite. They were family. The bikers had kept their promise. Not only had they helped her get the cafe up and running, but they had also made it their regular spot. They came every morning, every evening, sometimes in full force, other times in small groups. And every time, they made sure business was booming. But more than that, they made sure Lily knew she wasn't alone. The morning rush. The morning rush was in full swing, and Lily was in her element. She moved effortlessly behind the counter, pouring coffee, stacking plates, and greeting customers by name. "Morning, Lily," a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Sarah, one of the local teachers, standing at the counter with her usual tired smile. "Let me guess," Lily said, already grabbing a cup. "1 caramel latte with extra foam, and a blueberry muffin." Sarah grinned. "You know me too well." Lily chuckled, passing her the coffee and muffin. "How's the school treating you?" Sarah groaned. "These kids are gonna give me gray hair before I hit 30. Lily laughed. "On the house if you bring me their test answers." Sarah gasped, mocking offense. "Are you bribing me?" Lily winked. "Only a little." As Sarah took her order to a table, the cafe door swung open again. And in walked Marcus, a debt of gratitude. Lily had grown used to Marcus's presence. He wasn't just a customer. He was the reason she had this place. And yet every time he walked in, she still felt that same sense of awe. He was a force of nature. Dressed in his usual leather jacket, dark jeans, and riding boots, he carried himself with an effortless authority. And just like every morning, he walked straight to the counter. "Morning, boss," he said with a smirk. Lily rolled her eyes, pouring him a cup of coffee. "You're the worst." Marcus took the coffee, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "You sure? Because last time I checked, I gave you a whole cafe." Lily sighed dramatically. "Fine. You're the second worst." Marcus laughed, taking a seat at the counter. "How's business?" Lily couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. "It's been amazing. Better than I ever imagined." Marcus nodded. "Good. You deserve it." She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Marcus, I still don't know how to thank you for all this." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Why do you think we did this, Lily?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" Marcus took a sip of his coffee, setting the mug down before looking at her again. "You think this is about a free meal?" he asked. "About one act of kindness." Lily frowned slightly. "Isn't it?" Marcus shook his head. "No, this is about what you represent." She stared at him. "What do you mean?" Marcus exhaled. "People like us." He gestured toward the bikers scattered across the cafe. "We get judged every day, just by how we look. People see tattoos, leather jackets and motorcycles, and they assume the worst. They think we're criminals. Trouble. They don't see us as people." Lily nodded. She had seen it firsthand. Marcus's gaze softened. "But you did." Lily's throat tightened. "You didn't see me as a thug," Marcus continued. "You didn't flinch. You didn't hesitate. You treated me like a person when no one else would." He leaned forward slightly. "And that," he said, his voice softer now, "that's rare." Lily swallowed hard. I just did what was right," she murmured. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, and that's exactly why we'll always have your back." Carver's fall. Just as the moment settled between them, the cafe door opened again. This time, the entire room went silent. Because it was him. Carver. Lily felt her stomach twist. The once proud owner of Maplewood Cafe now looked worn down. His suit was slightly wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He hesitated in the doorway, looking around at the cafe. At Lily's cafe. Then his eyes landed on her. Lily set down the coffee pot. "Carver," she said coolly. Carver hesitated before walking toward the counter. He cleared his throat. "I heard your cafe is doing well." Lily raised an eyebrow. "It is." Carver shifted uncomfortably. "Maplewood isn't doing as well as it used to." Lily wasn't surprised. She had heard from customers that business had dropped significantly after she left. Carver had never realized that people didn't come to Maplewood just for coffee. They came for the kindness that Lily had provided. And without that, the place had lost its soul. Carver exhaled sharply. "I was wondering if maybe you'd consider coming back." Lily blinked. He had to be joking. "Excuse me?" she asked, barely keeping the laughter out of her voice. Carver looked uncomfortable. "I know we had our differences, but—" "No." Carver froze. "What?" Lily smiled, shaking her head. "No, Carver," she said. "I won't come back. I have a new home now." Carver clenched his jaw. "You're making a mistake." Lily tilted her head. "Am I?" Marcus, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "No, Carver," he said, his voice filled with calm authority. "You're the one who made the mistake." Carver's face twisted with frustration, but he had nothing left to say. Without another word, he turned and walked out. And Lily? She felt nothing but peace. As she turned back to Marcus, he grinned. "Guess that settles it," he said. "Lily's Cafe is officially the best place in town." Lily chuckled, looking around at the cafe filled with life, laughter, and warmth. "You know what?" she said, her heart lighter than ever. "I think you're right. A home built on kindness." Carver walks away. And so does the past. Lily stood there, watching Carver's retreating figure as he disappeared beyond the glass door. There was a time when his words would have shaken her. A time when she would have second-guessed herself, when she would have wondered if maybe, just maybe, she should have begged for her old job back. But now, she felt nothing. No bitterness, no hatred, only a quiet, profound sense of closure. She wasn't the same waitress he had fired. She was Lily, the owner of Lily's Cafe, and there was no power in the world that could make her give that up. Marcus watched her carefully, his dark eyes studying the way she straightened her posture, the way her chin lifted slightly in newfound confidence. "You good?" he asked, voice low but steady. Lily turned to him, smiling. "I'm perfect." Marcus grinned. "Knew you'd say that." She laughed, shaking her head as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Did you also know that you're supposed to be paying for your coffee instead of sitting here looking smug?" Marcus placed a dramatic hand over his heart. "Lily, after all we've been through, you still charge me for coffee." Lily smirked. "Damn right I do." Marcus chuckled, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a crisp $50 bill and slid it across the counter. "For the coffee," he said, "and for your future." Lily blinked at the bill. "That's way too much," she protested. Marcus shrugged. "Call it an investment." She stared at the bill for a moment, then, without breaking eye contact, slid a steaming cinnamon roll onto a plate and pushed it toward him. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Lily smirked. "Call it a return on your investment." He let out a booming laugh, shaking his head as he tore a piece of the cinnamon roll. And just like that, all the tension from the past hour disappeared. The community stands with Lily. The rest of the day was busier than ever. Word had spread. Carver had come begging for Lily to return, and she had turned him down. People came in not just to eat, but to celebrate her victory. The cafe filled with the warm hum of voices, the smell of freshly baked pastries, and the sound of laughter that had once been missing from her old job. Sarah, the school teacher, returned during lunch with a group of 5 other teachers, all of them chatting excitedly about how Lily's stand had become the talk of the town. "I swear, people are calling this place the new heart of the neighborhood," Sarah said, shaking her head in amusement as she sipped her latte. Lily chuckled. "It's just coffee and food, Sarah." Sarah grinned. "No, Lily. It's you." Lily paused, her heart swelling at the words. Maybe this really was more than just a cafe. Maybe this was home. And not just for her, but for everyone who walked through these doors. A surprise visit. As the evening rush wound down, Lily was finally able to take a breath. She wiped her hands on her apron and was about to sit when the cafe door swung open again. This time, an unfamiliar figure stepped inside. A tall man, dressed in a well-worn suit, his gray hair neatly combed back. He looked nervous. Lily frowned, stepping forward. "Hi there," she greeted, her usual warmth kicking in. "What can I get you?" The man hesitated, looking around the cafe. Then his gaze landed on Marcus, and recognition flickered in his eyes. "You're Marcus Reed," the man said. Marcus, who had been lounging at the counter, straightened instantly. His easygoing smirk vanished. "I am," Marcus said slowly. "Who's asking?" The man took a breath, then looked at Lily. "My name is Richard Bennett," he said. "I'm Carver's lawyer." The cafe fell silent. Lily's heartbeat quickened. "What?" she asked, not sure if she'd heard correctly. Richard shifted on his feet. "Carver sent me." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "For what?" The lawyer hesitated. "He wants to talk." Lily frowned. "About what?" Richard exhaled, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He slid it onto the counter. "About selling you Maplewood Cafe." Lily's entire world stopped. Marcus froze mid-drink. Sarah, who had been at the far table, gasped out loud. Lily could barely find her voice. "Wait, what?" Richard nodded, looking dead serious. "Carver made a mistake," he admitted, "and he knows it. Maplewood is failing. He's lost his regulars, his reputation, and his profits are plummeting. He's losing the cafe. Fast." He looked directly at Lily. "He wants to sell it. To you." The words hung in the air. Lily's hands gripped the counter. Maplewood Cafe. The place she had once called home. The place that had thrown her away like she was nothing. And now it was hers for the taking. Silence stretched through the cafe as everyone waited for her answer. Finally, Lily took a deep breath, and she said, No. The lawyer's eyebrows shot up. I'm sorry. Lily smiled, and this time it was a smile of power. I don't want it, she said simply. Richard looked stunned. But it's an opportunity. You could expand. Own 2 cafes. Lily shook her head. I already have everything I need right here. Richard stammered, looking between her and Marcus, trying to salvage the conversation. Marcus smirked, taking a slow sip of his coffee. I'd listen to her if I were you. Richard exhaled, rubbing his temple. All right, he muttered, closing the folder. I'll let him know. Without another word, he turned and walked out. As soon as the door closed behind him, the cafe erupted into cheers. Sarah practically jumped out of her chair. Lily, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. One of the bikers whistled. Damn, boss. You really told him to shove it. Marcus was grinning ear to ear. I knew you'd say no. Lily laughed, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing the past. She was building the future. And it was going to be beautiful. Strength in family. A new beginning, a new challenge. Lily had never felt this kind of peace before. Standing behind the counter of her cafe, watching people come in with genuine smiles, hearing their laughter fill the air. It was the kind of happiness that no amount of money could buy. She had turned down Carver's desperate attempt to sell her the old cafe because she no longer needed it. She had moved on, and Lily's cafe was already thriving, built not just on good coffee and pastries, but on genuine kindness and loyalty. But peace never lasted forever. Not in a town like this, and certainly not when people like Carver refused to fade into the past. The warning. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when Marcus walked in, a look on his face that immediately set Lily on edge. She had come to recognize his expressions over the past few weeks. He had a smirk when he was teasing her, a deadpan stare when he was annoyed, and a quiet, unreadable mask when something was wrong. Tonight, he wore the last one. Lily was wiping down the counter when she saw him approach. Okay, she said, setting the towel down and folding her arms. What's with the face? Marcus didn't answer right away. He pulled up a stool at the counter, glancing around the cafe as if checking for unwanted ears. Then he finally spoke. Carver's not done. Lily stiffened. What do you mean? Marcus exhaled, setting his phone on the counter. He's bitter, real bitter. Word is, he's been talking to people. The wrong kind of people. Lily frowned. Marcus, just say it. Marcus's jaw tensed. He's trying to get you shut down. For a moment, Lily couldn't process it. Shut down, she echoed. How? Marcus rubbed a hand over his face. Bribing inspectors, making complaints to the health department, spreading rumors. Anything to hurt your business. Lily's stomach twisted. He's really that desperate? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. Yeah. And that means we have to be ready. The trouble begins. The next morning, the trouble started. At exactly 9 a.m., just as Lily was getting ready for the morning rush, a man in a stiff gray suit walked in, holding a clipboard and wearing an expression so cold it could have frozen coffee mid-pour. Lily Walker, he asked, scanning the cafe. Lily wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. That's me. The man nodded. Health and safety inspection. Lily's heart skipped a beat. We didn't have anything scheduled, she said carefully. It's an unscheduled visit, the inspector said, flipping through his papers. Multiple complaints have been filed against this establishment. Lily's hands curled into fists. She didn't have to guess who was behind those complaints. Carver. A fight for survival. For the next 2 hours, the inspector scrutinized everything. He checked the kitchen, the storage rooms, the refrigerators. He tested the water temperature, looked under the tables, even took swabs from the counters. Lily watched helplessly as customers trickled out, looking concerned. A few people even hesitated near the door before turning away. unwilling to risk eating at a place under inspection. By the time the inspector was done, Lily's nerves were shredded. "Well?" she asked, crossing her arms. The man snapped his clipboard shut. "We'll be reviewing the results and will notify you if further action is necessary." Then, without another word, he walked out. The moment the door closed, Lily slammed a hand against the counter. "Damn it," she hissed. Marcus, who had been watching the whole thing from his usual spot, let out a deep sigh. "Yeah," he muttered. "This is gonna get worse before it gets better." Lily pressed her fingers to her temples. "I need a plan." Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "No, Lily. We need a plan. The biker code. Loyalty runs deep." The next evening, Lily's cafe became a war room. Marcus and his crew had gathered around, filling every available seat as Lily stood in front of them, laying out everything. "We have to fight back," she said, pacing. "I don't know how yet, but I'm not letting Carver take this place away from me." A large biker named Hank, who lived up to his name, grinned. "Then it's time we remind people why we don't back down." Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus smirked. "You run a cafe, Lily. We run the streets." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not asking you to start a gang war." Tank let out a loud laugh. "Nah, boss. Not that kind of fight." A woman named V, who was one of the sharpest minds in the crew, leaned forward. "Carver's playing dirty," she said. "So let's remind him what happens when people try to mess with family." Lily hesitated. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus grinned. "We flood this place with business." Lily frowned. "How does that stop him?" V smirked. "Because if your cafe is packed every day, no one's gonna believe the rumors Carver is spreading. And if an inspector tries anything shady, they'll have 100 witnesses ready to call bullshit." Lily's eyes widened. "That actually makes sense," she admitted. Marcus gave her a mock-offended look. "Did you just doubt my genius?" Lily rolled her eyes. "A little." Marcus grinned. "Good. Keeps me humble." The plan in action. The next morning, Lily's cafe was packed. Word had spread. The bikers came first, bringing their families, their friends, and their friends' friends. Then the locals joined in, eager to show their support. And soon, the place was so busy that there was a line outside the door. Lily barely had time to breathe as orders flew in, plates stacked up, and the espresso machine worked overtime. But through it all, she felt alive. She wasn't just fighting for her cafe. She was fighting for everyone who believed in her. And when Carver showed up, standing across the street watching it all unfold, Marcus made sure he saw just how much Lily had won. He walked out, crossed the street, and stopped right in front of Carver. Then, he smiled. "Guess you'll have to find another way to stay relevant," Marcus said. Carver gritted his teeth. "This isn't over." Marcus chuckled. "No, Carver, for you, it is." And with that, he turned and walked back into the cafe, where Lily was thriving, where she had already won, and where Carver would never be able to touch her again. The victory that echoed through town. Carver's last stand. Carver had always been a man who thrived on power and control. For years, he had run Maplewood Cafe with an iron grip, dictating how things were done, making sure profits came first, and dismissing employees as if they were disposable. He never expected that the waitress he fired, the one he thought was insignificant, would rise above him. Yet here he was, standing across the street from Lily's cafe, watching as the place overflowed with life and laughter, while his own business died a slow, painful death. His cafe had become a ghost town. The tables that were once filled with customers, empty. The hum of morning conversations, gone. The regulars he had taken for granted, now sitting in Lily's cafe, supporting the very woman he had tried to destroy. It burned. But Carver wasn't done yet. If playing dirty hadn't worked, then he'd push harder. If he couldn't destroy Lily's business through legal tricks, he'd find another way. A night of shadows. It happened at midnight. Lily had just finished closing up, exhaustion pulling at her muscles as she wiped down the last table. The cafe had been so busy that she barely had time to sit, and now that the adrenaline had worn off, she felt the weight of the day hit her all at once. Marcus had stayed behind, as usual, sitting on a bar stool with a cup of coffee in hand. He watched as she moved, his gaze unreadable. "You should go home," he finally said. Lily chuckled, stretching her arms over her head. "Says the guy who hasn't left either." Marcus smirked. "Yeah, but I'm not the one running this place." She sighed, tossing the rag onto the counter. "I just need a few more minutes." Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his eyes always watchful. And it was a good thing he was there. Because the second the lights turned off, a sound outside caught his attention. A soft shuffling. Lily didn't hear it at first, but Marcus did. His instincts, honed by years of reading trouble before it happened, sent an immediate warning through his system. His jaw tightened. Something wasn't right. Then the smell hit him. Smoke. His head snapped toward the windows, just in time to see a flicker of orange light in the alleyway. Fire. Marcus was moving before he even spoke. "Lily, get out. Now." Lily barely had time to react before Marcus was racing toward the door, throwing it open. And that's when they saw it. Flames licking the back of the building. Someone had set her cafe on fire. A race against time. Lily's breath hitched. Her cafe. Her dream. It was burning. But she didn't freeze. She didn't scream. She acted. "Call the fire department," she yelled, sprinting toward the kitchen where the fire extinguisher was mounted. Marcus was already pulling out his phone, his other hand gripping the handle of his own larger extinguisher that he had stashed near the front entrance. By the time Lily got outside, Marcus was already tearing through the flames, dousing the growing fire before it could spread. The air thickened with smoke, making it harder to breathe, but neither of them stopped. Then, sirens wailed in the distance. The fire department arrived within minutes, and as firefighters rushed in to put out the remaining embers, Lily stood there, coughing into her sleeve, her heart pounding. It could have been worse. So much worse. The fire had started near the back entrance, close to the trash bins. If it had spread any faster, the entire building could have been engulfed. Marcus stood next to her, his face set in stone, his fists clenched. "This wasn't an accident," he muttered. Lily already knew. Carver's mistake. The next morning, the fire was all over town. People whispered in the streets, their voices filled with speculation. Someone tried to burn down Lily's cafe. Who would do something like that? She's got enemies. We all know that. By the afternoon, the rumors had turned into certainty. Carver was behind it. He had gone too far. And this time, there was proof. Caught in the act. Carver had thought he was careful, that setting the fire at night would leave no witnesses. But what he hadn't counted on. Security cameras. One of the businesses next door had caught everything. The grainy footage showed a man in a dark hoodie, moving toward the cafe's back entrance. A few moments later, flames erupted. And though the man had tried to hide his face, people recognized the way he walked, the way he moved. It was Carver's assistant. Justice comes knocking. By nightfall, Carver was arrested. His assistant, under pressure from law enforcement, confessed everything. Carver had paid him to start the fire, desperate to destroy the one thing he couldn't control. But instead of winning, Carver had done the one thing that sealed his downfall completely. He had turned the entire town against him. Lily's true victory. 3 days later, Lily's cafe reopened. The damage had been small, and thanks to Marcus and his crew, the repairs had been done overnight. And when the doors opened that morning, the line of customers stretched down the block. They came with flowers, with cards, with money. They came to support her, to stand by her, to prove that no act of hatred could destroy what she had built. By noon, Lily realized something. She hadn't just won against Carver. She had become something more. A symbol. A force that proved kindness could not be silenced. And as she stood behind the counter, looking at the people who had rallied around her, the community that had become her family, she finally understood. This wasn't just a cafe. This was home. And she wasn't going anywhere. Epilogue. 1 year later, Lily's cafe had expanded. A second location had opened in the next town over. And Marcus, he had become more than just her protector. He had become her partner, not just in business, but in life. And as they stood together, watching the cafe they had built flourish, Marcus leaned in with a smirk. "Guess I was right about you," he said. Lily chuckled. "About what?" Marcus tilted his head. "You were never just a waitress." Lily smiled, and as she looked at everything she had built, she knew he was right. She had been so much more all along. A legacy built on fire and steel. Picking up the pieces, the smell of burnt wood and smoke still lingered in the alley behind Lily's cafe. Though the fire had been put out in time to save the building, the scars remained. A charred section of the back wall, blackened dumpsters, the faint ghost of flames licking the pavement. But despite the damage, despite the attempt to burn her down, Lily stood strong. She had fought too hard to let this break her. Her cafe had survived. And Carver had not. Carver's downfall. The town was buzzing with news of Carver's arrest. His former customers, former employees, even the people who once respected him, they all turned their backs. No one could believe he had gone that far. Some whispered about his desperation, his hatred, his unwillingness to accept defeat. Others didn't bother whispering at all. He deserved it, they said. He was always cruel, they muttered. But Lily? She felt no hatred toward him, no satisfaction in his downfall. Just pity. Because in the end, Carver had destroyed himself. He had built his life on control, money, and power. But Lily had built hers on loyalty, kindness, and resilience. And in the end, kindness had won. The town stands with Lily. The very next morning, before the sun had even fully risen, Lily arrived at her cafe to find something she hadn't expected. A line. Not of customers, but of friends. People from all over town, the teachers, the local shop owners, the elderly couples, even teenagers from the high school, had gathered in front of Lily's cafe, their arms full of paint cans, wooden planks, cleaning supplies. She stared, stunned. Marcus, standing beside her, chuckled. "Guess the town's got your back," he murmured. Sarah, the schoolteacher, stepped forward with a bright grin. "You helped all of us, Lily," she said. "Now it's our turn." Lily felt her throat tighten. She had never asked for this. But as she looked at the people who had come together for her, she realized this was what real success looked like. Not money, not power, people. So, together, they rebuilt. They painted over the burnt wood, they fixed the damaged back entrance, they scrubbed away the ashes that had been left behind. By the time the sun set, Lily's cafe stood taller than before. And so did Lily. Marcus's final gift. That night, after the cafe had been restored, Marcus sat across from Lily at the counter, sipping his usual coffee. He had been there through it all. And as much as Lily had fought this battle herself, she knew she wouldn't have made it through without him. She owed him everything. So, she reached into her apron and pulled out a key. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Lily grinned. "It's yours." Marcus tilted his head. "Lily, you've been here since the beginning," she said. "This cafe, our cafe, it wouldn't have survived without you." Marcus stared at the key for a long moment. Then, he took it. And that was all the answer Lily needed. 1 year later, Lily's cafe didn't just survive. It thrived. With Marcus as her co-owner, they expanded to a second location in a nearby town. The business grew, not because of marketing, not because of big investments, but because of the people who believed in them. And Carver? Forgotten. Maplewood Cafe shut down within months. The building sat abandoned, a relic of a past that no one cared to remember. Lily had won, but it wasn't just about beating Carver. It was about proving something bigger. That kindness is never weakness. That doing the right thing will always matter. That real success isn't built on greed, but on people. The last ride. On the 1-year anniversary of Lily's Cafe, the roar of motorcycles filled the streets once again. But this time, it wasn't for revenge. It was for celebration. As the bikers pulled into the lot, Marcus stood beside Lily, watching the scene unfold. "Hell of a ride, huh?" he murmured. Lily smiled, nodding. "Yeah," she said softly, "but it's just getting started." And with that, she turned back toward the cafe, her home, her legacy. And for the first time in her life, she knew she had truly won.